Thanks for the chairman's introduction. It's my pleasure to share our new work FAN, a newly designed lightweight authenticated cryptographic algorithm here. My presentation will be given in 6 parts to introduce the new algorithm. I would like to start by briefly reviewing the previous work in lightweight symmetric design. Wide application of low-ended embedded devices has largely stimulated development of lightweight ciphers. They share similar features. Well, lightweight block ciphers has already processed many successful designs, but lightweight stream ciphers hit the bottleneck of large internal state size to resist the TMTO attacks. There comes a solution using cipher keys stored in devices, non-volatile memory not only for initialization, but also encryption. From the view of practical engineering, it's better to access key continuously. Name the design principle as CKU. Immediately CKU-based designs are all adopting the brain-like structure, which has recently been reported vulnerable to correlation attacks. Thus, we are motivated to design a new CKU-based lightweight stream cipher with entirely different structure, supporting integrated encryption and authentication. It results in a new lightweight AED algorithm named as FAN. Let's move on to the specification. FAN supports 128-bit key, 64-bit IV, promising 128-bit security, and up to 72-bit tag with the IV respecting restriction. It has 2 work modes, stream cipher and AED algorithm. The maximum amount of inputs is 2 to 64 bits. It contains a full process of initialization to finalization. FAN has 192-bit state, composed of 4 blades, 1 accumulator, 1 spindle. Additionally, it has 1 byte counter. For the main function in FAN, the output function linearly extracts 3 bytes of the spindle and accumulator for each output byte. The state update function has a constant neutral feedback structure. For each blade, 1 byte has a feedback from accumulator and rotates. 1 has a feedback from spindle, the other 2 are invariant. Finally, these 4 blades run a wholly blade-wise rotation. The accumulator adds 1 invariant byte from each blade on different units. The spindle takes SPS network. The other invariant byte from each blade is added to the spindle on different units. The subkey sequence and message blocks are defined differently in each processes and add to the last 3 spindle bytes. The counter updates in the control of our C6. If it equals 0, the last 6 bytes update has a maximum period LFSR, then they are added together to update RC6. Once it arrives at 1, these 7 bits do not change anymore. Counter state is always added to the first spindle byte as a round constant. RC7 is defined as follows to separate the processing associated data and the encryption phases. For the initialization, we first load key and IV into state, then updates 52 rounds. Set the counter, message block, and run key as follows, which means neither subkey nor message block takes part in the state update. For the processing associated data phase, it processes AD in 24-bit block. Here is the padding rule. Set the counter, message block, and run key as follows, which means only the AD takes part in the state update, but not the subkey. For encryption, it processes plain text in 24-bit blocks. Here is the padding rule. Set the counter, message block, and run key as follows. That is, subkey similarly cyclically select as next 3 consecutive bytes of cipher key. Each round generates a keystring block and then the ciphertext block. Next, update state. both the plaintext and subkey blocks drawn in the update. For finalization, key AV first read XOR to the internal state, then update state 28 rounds using the initial iterations. Next, find generates tag using the iteration in keystream generation. Set the counter, message, block, and run key as follows. The decryption and verification is similar as encryption and finalization. Here is the overall workflow. To resist the traditional attacks on stream ciphers, internal state is wholly updated in a nonlinear way. To offer a balanced performance in software and hardware implementations, Vine adopt bytewise operations. Well, let's move on to the design rationale. The structure is inspired by electric fan, which rapidly provides highly confused level by parallel constant mutual feedbacks between the nonlinear spindle and linear blades. Since Vine is beta-oriented, it naturally takes 8 times 8 S-box. For hardware efficiency, we newly designed the S-box and its logic circuit with relatively good properties. It is constructed by a 3-round balanced Feistel structure with 3 different 4-bit to 4-bit functions and a bit shuffle to make the terms distributed as evenly as possible. To achieve enough active S-boxes in minimum initial rounds, we choose bytewise permutation with maximum differential and linear branch numbers of 5. For the sake of low memory footprint in hardware and high efficiency in software, we choose the well-designed primitive in AES. To achieve strong initialization security, we have checked IVK differences propagation, and there are at least 32 active S-boxes in 26 rounds. Thus, we set initialization rounds by a double to 52 rounds. Vine injects message into the state so that it could obtain authentication for free. In order to divide different work phases, a counter is set. To achieve strong encryption security, the key also participates in an encryption phase. We will now come to the security evaluation. We analyze the security of every phase with these items. It results that Vine can achieve enough security margin against no attacks. Now I will talk about the implementation performance. It takes about 8 cycles per byte for encryption and software performance. It occupies about 2,327 GE and the speed of 9.6 gigabit per second with hardware performance. It shows that Vine can achieve competitive hardware and software performances compared with other no lightweight stream ciphers. To sum up, we propose a new AEAD algorithm fan. It is the first non-Green-like small state stream cipher and also the first small state cipher with authentication function. For the apply, we expect our work can push forward such small state designs to a wider perspectives and inspire further research. That's all. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yuqing Zhao. Today, our talk is related key analysis of generalized Feistel networks with expanding run functions. This is a joint work with Wen Qiyu and my advisor, Professor Guo. We are all from Shandong University. Here is the outline of our talk. I will first introduce background. We will recall something about Feistel networks. Feistel networks is one of the most popular ways to design block cipher by iterating several times of Feistel permutation. The Feistel permutation maps 2 n bits to 2 n bits like this picture. While f is the domain providing run function, mapping n bits to n bits. As you can see the picture, B turned to the left. The right side is A XOR FB. By replacing wrong function with contracting ones, we obtain contracting Festo networks. By replacing wrong function with expanding ones, we obtain expanding Festo networks. By alternatively using contracting and expanding wrong functions, we obtain alternating Festo networks. We call these contractions generalized Festo networks. In this paper, we focus on related key security of generalized Festo networks with expanding wrong functions. We now briefly review the previous research. In the single case setting, Liu Bei and Rokov initiated probable security of Festo networks and their variants. Hong and Logvision et al. Prolate CFN, EFN, and AFN could achieve CC security up to nearly 2 to M adversarial queries, M being the domain size of the round function. In the related key setting, Liang and Kono initiated the theoretical treatment of security and the related key attacks. Babsa and Fashim established RK security for 4 rounds balanced Festo networks. Guo established RK security for the so-called Feste2 Feste ciphers. Let's introduce our motivation. Lax, native, and potential expanding run functions are attractive in theory. AFN have been the structure of the least formal preserving encryption standards. The contracting run functions are built from AES-CBC, while the expanding are from AES-CTR. EFN and AFN as symptotically optimal bonds have been proved, while the minimal number of rounds necessary for CC security remains unclear. GFN remains far less understood in the RK model. The second part is our contributions. In this paper, we study related key security of generalized Festo networks using expanding run functions. For expanding Festo networks, we pinpoint light 2m divided by n and get the upper integer plus 2 rounds as sufficient for single case CC security. When 2 independent cases Q1, Q2 are alternatively used in each round, 2m divided by n and get upper integer plus 2 rounds are sufficient for RK-CC security up to 2 to n divided by 2 adversarial queries. This table is the probable security results on EFN. As you can see from this table, for bursted bound security, we reduce number of rounds and increase the robustness of the primitive. For alternating Festo networks, 4 rounds using Q1, Q2, Q1, Q2 is RK-ACC security up to 2 to n divided by 2 queries. And using treatable key function as a round function, 4 round AFN with identical round key is RK-CC security up to 2 to n divided by 2 queries. This table shows the probable security results on AFN. The third part is our security proofs. In all our proofs, we use the two-step approach. The RK security proofs start with a generic standard to ideal reduction, replacing the wrong function with ideal key function. Then the crux is to analyze the idealized networks in the RK setting. For the RK analysis of the idealized networks, we employ the widely used H-coefficient technique. This step follows the same general paradigm as the H-coefficient-based single-case CC security analysis. So, the analysis has to consider the interaction between queries and the different related keys, and the interference between different rounds that are using the same keys. We now briefly discuss the proof for EFN. Firstly, we pinpoint the number of rounds that appear sufficient. You can see the picture. We identify the number of rounds sufficient for field diffusion is m divided by n and gets upper integer, and the 2 middle rounds are sufficient as a randomness source. So this is the RKACC security expanding fast-tool. Now we pay attention to birthday bound security or EFN, where F maps n bits to n bits. For 0, 1, this is wanted for 2m divided by n and gets upper integer plus 2 rounds of EFN. As the first step, we replace the keyed function f n bits to n bits with a random function rf n bits to n bits. As two independent keys Q1, Q2 are involved, a standard habit argument yields its inequality. Well, the concept is to analyze the idealized EFN. Then we will use speech quotient technique. We will define bad predicts or bad transcripts and upper bound their probability in ideal world. And then visualize the probability to obtain any good transcript in the real world and the ideal world are sufficiently close. The bad transcripts capture either claw or switch in tau. It is clear that the probability of tau ID in tau bad is less than or equal to the advantage of claw-free plus the advantage of switch-free. Next, analyzing good transcripts. Well, to start, we need to define bad predict on the ideal keyed function rf n bits to n bits, such that once this is not fulfilled, the event tau ID equal to tau is equivalent to rf n bits to n bits, satisfying to Q new and distinct equations. These are two Q equations. The proof for AFN is similar to the proof for EFN. We must define the bad predict on the ideal keyed function such that to satisfy into Q equations. For 0, 2, this is an advantage for 4 rounds of AFN. We use tweakable keyed functions that behave as contracting for tweak input 0 while expanding for tweak 1. For the AFN using such a tweakable keyed function as the round function, the reduction is able to handle the case of identical round case. So we can obtain the corollary one. This is an advantage for 4 rounds of AFN using a tweakable round function and a single key. For conclusion, when we show that when two independent keys Q1, Q2 are alternatively used each round, 2m divided by n and get the upper integer plus 2 rounds are sufficient for related key security of EFN. A constant number of 4 rounds are sufficient for related key security of AFN. Our results complete the picture of probable related key security of JFN and provide additional theoretical support for the AFN-based NIST format preserving encryption standards FF1 and FF3. Apply what you have learned today. Next week, you should understand the H quotient technique. Within 4 months, you should prove RKACC or EFN and AFN in single case setting. Okay, that's all. Thank you for your listening. I'm happy to take the question.
So this paper is about the key-dependent message security of the key alternating Feistel ciphers. And it's a joint work with Pouya Farshim, Yannick Serin, and Damien Vergniaud. So I'm Louisa Gatti, and I work at ANSI and ENS. So the goal of this paper is to give a proof technique to analyze symmetric construction under the strong key-dependent message security model. So let's see what is KDM security. KDM stands for key-dependent message security. And in this security model, we take into account a very strong adversary that has access to some ciphertexts that are the result of the encryption of some message that depend on the key, even if the adversary has no access to the key. So this model was first introduced by Blake, Rogeray, and Trimpton in 2003. And a use case is full disk encryption. When you're using a full disk encryption tool, what happens is that your data are encrypted at a low level, and the encryption key might end in the disk. So you will encrypt this key by itself. And the construction we analyze is the CAF. So for key alternating Feisel ciphers, this is the construction here. You can see that it's an instantiation of the Feistel network. So the message is split into the left part and the right part. The right part will be XORed with a subkey, and then this value will be processed by a random function f1 and then XORed to the left part of the message. So this is one round CAF. So the configuration of a CAF is a number of rounds if all these functions are equal or different. Of course, if all these functions are equal, it means that we have an efficient configuration because you will implement this function only once. And the configuration encompasses also the fact that all these keys are equal or different. Usually, in practice, all these keys are derivated from a master key. And the previous work on this construction was done by Lamp and Serin in 2015. They analyzed this construction under the indistinguishability game. And the same year, Guo and Lin analyzed the indifferentiability of the CAF star. So the CAF star is a little bit different from the CAF. So instead of XORing this key before this random function, it will be XORed after. And this construction is important because it's used in practice in the DES and Ghost block ciphers. So here is the indistinguishability game for the KDM adversary. So as in all indistinguishability game, we have this adversary that talks to an oracle, and this oracle either implements the real world or the ideal world. So in the real world, we have the construction we want to analyze. And in the ideal world, we have this ideal primitive. So for block ciphers, it's a random permutation. And to simulate the fact that this adversary can access some ciphertexts that are the result of the encryption of a message that depend on the key, we will allow the adversary to send a function phi that can depend on the key, even if this adversary does not know the key. So if this function is a constant, it means that we are in the regular indistinguishability game. And if it's dependent on the key, so we have our KDM CPA adversary. So here, the oracle will compute phi of k, and then it will evaluate the output of phi of k under either the construction you want to analyze, either this random permutation. And of course, if we have a KDM like a KDM secure construction, the adversary should not be able to distinguish between these two games. So here is the advantage of the adversary. It's the classical definition of it. And for the CCA adversary, he is also allowed to decrypt some ciphertext, and this ciphertext he is allowed only to decrypt some constants, because we can think that we can allow him to send a function phi, so a ciphertext that depends on the key, but there is no use case for that. So this is a standard decryption. So when you want to analyze the KDM security of a construction, you need to find the largest set of function phi such that the previous advantage is small. And it should include the constant function, because this is what it's done in the regular CPA game. You can encrypt messages that are constants. And we know that since the seminal paper that the KDM set has to be restricted. Otherwise, we can extract the key. And we gave an example in a previous work done with Pouya Farshim and Damien Vergniaud. We exploit this kind of function, the function that has clause that collide under the key k. So phi1 and phi2 are different, but phi1 of k is equal to phi2 of k. So we should put some constraint on this KDM set, and the first one is this claw freeness, so to remove this kind of function. On this work, we also proved that the ideal cipher is KDM secure under a claw free set. And now I will see the KDM security of this CAF. So here you can see that I took the KDM security game, and I just instantiated for the CAF. So the adversary here can ask to encrypt under this couple of functions, phi L and phi R, because of this Feistel-like construction. And we also gave access to this public function to the adversary because they are public, and the same in the ideal world. We feel that claw-freeness, it's important to have KDM security, but it's not enough. So for example, for the 4-round CAF, where all the internal functions are equal, so the efficient version of the 4-round CAF, and where all the keys are independent, if the only restriction is claw-freeness, we can find some function to break the security game with only 2 queries. And we took advantage of this kind of function, some function that offsets a subkey. So this kind of function looks like this: phi of k is equal to k1 XOR a constant. So for this configuration, we feel that we need also this new property, this offset freeness for the set file. You can find, of course, the detail in the paper. Another funny attack is the sliding attack that works for any number of rounds for the configuration where all the internal function and all the keys are equal. We already know that this construction is not even CPA secure, but with our strong adversary, with 1 query, we can extract the key easily. So now I will just give you an overview of the proof technique, because this is the heart of our paper. So here you can, so this proof technique is based on the game playing technique and the H coefficient technique. So the H coefficient technique was first introduced by Patahan, and it's a widely used technique to analyze the security of block ciphers. And here we have our adversary. You can recognize our ideal world, our real world. And in the middle, we introduce this perfect world. So this perfect world was introduced to catch the claw-free, the claw-freeness property. So here, each time the adversary will ask the encryption of some function phi, we will sample a random output. So here, if we choose 2 functions that have a clause, we will have a different behavior here. So this first advantage is generic. So if you want to use this proof technique to analyze another construction, you don't have to recompute this one, but you will need to work on that one because this one is close to the construction. So I don't have much time to go into detail, but you can find all of the details in the paper. So now I will just present our result. So here in blue, we have what we proved. So we proved that the 4-round Feistel, where all the internal functions are equal, so the efficient version of the 4-round CAF, and where all these keys are different, and actually we don't care about like the values in the middle. We have KDM security under a set that is claw-free, offset-free, and offset XOR-free. So we are not surprised about these 2 first constraints, because claw-freeness, we said that claw-freeness is needed. Offset-freeness, we showed that we have an attack if we only have a claw-free KDM set. And we have this new constraint, this offset XOR-freeness, which includes these kinds of functions. So functions that are the XOR of 2 different functions and a constant. So here are the 2 conjectures we have. Like, we didn't prove these 2 lines. So we feel that we can remove this new condition, this new restriction on the KDM set, if we have different functions, so 4-round and different function, or if we want to keep to have an efficient construction, so the same internal function, we need to go to 5 rounds. And as you can see, we only removed this offset XOR-freeness. And the big question is how many rounds do we need to have the KDM security level of the ideal cipher? So KDM security under a set that is only claw-free. So we do not have the answer, but we know that we cannot have the KDM security under closed preset for the configuration where all FIs are equal and where all KIs are equal, because we have this sliding attack. So I will end this talk now. So just remember that our next work is about this line. So this is the important thing to do in new work, in the next work. So thank you for your attention.